This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. The Spirit. News and information from a higher perspective. Your host, Harry Wilkinson.
Well, hello and welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. My name is Harry Wilkinson. I am your host, and this is the show where we talk about the days and weeks, events, happenings in the world, politics, international news, sports even sometimes, although I don't think we're going to talk about sports today, but anything and everything that we interact with on a daily or weekly basis. All of the stuff that's thrown at us from social media or our new media, the 24-hour news cycles, even the more traditional forms of media such as newspapers, or even just listening to the news on the car radio on your way into work or out of work or wherever your travels might take you. All of these things have an effect on us, and particularly in today's time when we have more of it coming at us through various means. And the gatekeepers who make the decisions about what kinds of stories are told and how they will be told deliver us stories that tend to provoke, to just use a as less dramatic a term as I can put it, and when collectively or in total we are exposed to these things, they can be quite overwhelming. Hearing more and more about media fatigue and all of these things, which is quite understandable. So what I've been trying to do over the years on this show is to share a technique that I use, and the technique involves sort of a different way, perhaps, of looking at things than most people are used to. It is taking a step back from all of these stories, taking a step back from really the so-called realities of the world and recognizing them for what they truly are, which are the illusions of the world. And not only that, but looking at them from the point of view of these are illusions we have created, because at the highest level of our beings, that's what we do. We are creators. You may be familiar with the term a co-creator with the divine mind, if you will. We create these situations, we create these interactions to allow us to have experiences, and ultimately to remind us who and what we are, the truth of who and what we really are. So when the impulse is to pull away, when the impulse is to shut down and turn away from the media, turn off your gadgets and such. Now, I'm not saying that you should constantly have these things on. Taking a break from them, I think, is certainly a very healthy thing to do. But what I'm saying is that unless you're willing to, as I've said many times on this show, unless you're willing to live on a mountaintop somewhere, there's no way to really disconnect yourself from the influence of these forms of media and how they connect with or maybe shape your view of the world. And in fact, I'll go even further to say that that is not an optimal thing to do. You're missing a great opportunity. You're missing the opportunity to go into these stories that might upset you. And look at them from that point of view that I just expressed. Understand that underneath all of this is a reality, a truth that is greater than what this manifestation is, which is an illusion. It's an illusion that allows you to experience and almost do a holographic kind of game playing with to get to the real truth of the situation. And no better example for me to share with you about this approach is what's going on today. I live here outside of the Washington, D.C. area in Northern Virginia, and there is about to be a protest rally in Washington, D.C. on what they call the Mall. That's where the Smithsonian museums are, and the Pentagon, and all of the big touristy attractions are. And that's also where most of the protests throughout American history have taken place. This one is called Unite the Right, and it's their second rally. You might recall their first rally was here in the state of Virginia in a town called Charlottesville, and it made national news because of the extraordinary level of violence and the death of one young woman and the injury of many other people. This is a attempt by many in the white nationalist movements to kind of converge and express their discontent, if you will. And my first reaction, if you notice the title of today's episode, wasn't even going to touch on this. I wasn't even going to give it a moment's thought. I was turning away from it. I was disconnecting from it. I was like a child holding my hands over my ears going, la 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 la, this is not happening. And I realized that's what I was doing. I caught myself. And I said, this is not the way that you're talking to people on your show about how to deal with these things. You need to go in and connect to get to the truth of what this really is all about. And so that's what I did. As uncomfortable as it made me, I got into that discomfort. I went in as far as I could go into that discomfort. And I recognized the truth about it. I recognized the illusion that it actually is. And I took as much energy from that as I could. And I marveled at the depth of the illusion. This illusion of hate built upon fear. And how it affected me. And I said, wow, this is truly extraordinary. Because what we've created through this illusion, what's really underlying it is once again our oneness. It's our need for connection. It's the fear, totally illusory, but all fear is, that the members, these people have, of being discounted, of being discarded, of not being worthy, of not being connected. That's what's underneath. And that's what, whatever happens, the events that occur around this, that's ultimately what will be discovered by those participating in it, by those disturbed by it, by those touched by it. There'll be news stories, there'll be interviews with people. But throughout all of this is getting to that root. And I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight, immediately. It's a process, and it's sort of a game we play. A game of revealing, if you will. We already know these things. We already have these things at the deepest level, or highest level, if you will. But in playing the human game, we forget them. And the fun of it is rediscovering them. Now you can take that for what it's worth. It made me feel a lot better when I refocused, reframed, and remembered. Perhaps that helps you too. So on with the show. The topic of the show that I really wanted to talk about, which is really a continuation of the past couple of shows we've been talking about the ability to change one's mind through the use of certain psychedelic chemicals, such as LSD and so forth, and the research that is reemerging, that is taking science and scientists and professionals in a direction that for some seems to be very unusual. And all of this is really about, what all of this comes down to is consciousness. The ability that we have to be aware of consciousness. The ability of understanding consciousness in varying states, altered states of consciousness, if you will. And much of this is around this book that I've been recommending by Michael Pollan, called How to Change Your Mind. What the new, let me get the full title here. It's called How to Change Your Mind. And it's called What the New, hold on, it's going to come up in a minute. Oh, here we go. What the New Science of Psychedelics Teaches Us About Consciousness, Dying, Addiction, Depression, and more. Fascinating stuff to come out at this time. Fascinating that we have chosen to create the reemergence of these psychedelics that for so many years were banned, turned away from in fear, talked about in hushed tones, if you will, shunned in many ways, horror stories created about it. And all it really is tapping into consciousness at levels that we aren't familiar with, and what I think basically is the reality of it that many people are afraid of. I mean, these kinds of psychotropic drugs have existed in plant form for millennia. The traditions of most indigenous peoples includes shamanic use of such roots and plants that change consciousness. And yet for some reason, and much of it may have to do with the emergence of science and science's need to sort of disconnect itself from anything that smacks of mysticism or the religious realm. For centuries, science has had to do that.